Right, well, I don't know what time the Pope's arriving in this country, Glasgow, flying into Glasgow, but all I know is that the storm or political furor that has preceded his arrival is probably not been matched in many months, if not years. I don't remember so much when John Paul II came. Of course, it's Pope Benedict that's coming this time. The Polish Pope that was here in 1982, because I wasn't here in Britain at the time. I was studying in Pasadena, California. But I know I've got a book actually in my home library, a big massive book of the Pope's visit. It was a big deal. I think millions of people actually literally turned out. I don't think quite so many are going to turn out this time, and perhaps one of the reasons for that is, apart from the fact that many people are saying the Pope's a very quiet person, a very bookish person, a very intelligent person, and a very German person, not that that's a thing to be held against him. See, I'm wearing my Italian made sweat top, not because I'm any big fan of Italy, but I'm not against him, so I'll do that. I'm not against the German Pope. This guy, or Cardinal rather, not a guy, Cardinal Walter Kasper, I thought he was a ghost, but anyway, who, again, one of the popes, that's Pope Benedict's top advisors until he recently, I think, resigned, was reported in the paper today, German papers, because, again, he's German, I think, saying that arriving at Heathrow in Britain is like arriving in a third world country. And that Britain is in the grip of aggressive atheism or something. And people are up in arms. Well, I guess the truth does hurt, doesn't it? But who are, you know, I suppose what people take exception to rather, is having the finger pointed at them by people or an organisation that is far from, you know, white, although I believe the Pope will probably be wearing white, or pristine in its own dealings and behaviour. And of course it's the sex abuse scandal, but there are other things that you might be critical of the Catholic Church for. And I'll come on to some of the positive things, but I mean, obviously the sex abuse scandal, I mean, again, just in the last few days, this news coming out of Belgium about the fact that of all the 50 odd dioceses that they have there, not one of them is free of cases of child sex abuse and so on. And then, you know, a lot of people have been critical of Pope Benedict because of his response to, I mean, he seems to have been very reluctant to be apologetic and to meet with the victims of the abuse, or to take, more importantly, firm, stern and decisive action to root out and deal with the perpetrators of these things. And instead, I mean, I was listening to one report, which is just, it was on the Channel 4 News this evening, about, here in England, 22 former priests, well no, that's the problem, they're not former priests, 22 priests who had been convicted and in fact served over a year in prison, or been given year prison terms, and who, some of them were still on the register in this big book of priests with all the others. So it just feels like, and certainly with the victims who they've interviewed in recent days and times, that, you know, priests are in a special category. They can do no wrong. Oh, they sin. Oh, we'll have to look after them and so on. But yet the victims, oh well, you know, sorry about that, but they get ignored. They have to fight tooth and nail to get any compensation, any recognition, any apology, and so on. So I think it's when Catholic priests or cardinals come out and say, you know, this is a third world country and people here are aggressive atheists, one has to wonder, well, why is that? Why wouldn't they be? If religious people, or so-called spiritual religious people, are behaving in this way, and I know it's only a minority of priests, because there are a lot of very decent, very good, very wonderful, probably, priests and Catholic people, but when the organisation and the Pope himself protect the evildoers, these wicked people really, and don't allow them to be dealt with properly by the law, and continue to protect them and continue to deny justice to the victims of the abuse by these priests and paedophiles, then it not only taints, but it actually corrupts the whole of the church. But I mean, that's just one aspect. There are other. I mean, to be honest, and I'll be honest with you, I don't think the founding principles of the Catholic Church, i.e. that the Pope is supposedly the successor to Peter, who was the first among the apostles, who was supposed to be the first Pope of the Church, based on the fact that Jesus says, "Oh, you know, you are Peter, and on this rock I'll build my church." I think it's a misunderstanding of what Jesus was actually saying, and I don't think Jesus came to found a church here on earth. I think he came to found a church in a spiritual sense, where true believers and followers make up a spiritual church, and they don't have to belong to a particular organisation or group which is made up of men who are very fallible, and particularly if they're celibate, who are going to be tempted, or some of them at least, not all obviously. I think the idea of the Catholic Church, the way it's formed, structured, and the basis of its beliefs are not sound. So that's a general criticism. But I will say, as I was saying earlier, there are many wonderful Catholic people, priests, but I don't think they're wonderful because they're Catholics or because they're priests. I think it's because they aspire to the same decent principles that non-Catholics, maybe are from other religions, maybe they're Jewish, maybe they're Hindus, maybe they're Buddhists, maybe they're atheists, humanists, you know. But providing they adhere to teachings, laws, principles that are benevolent and caring for other people, then you know, they're going to do good. And there are many people who are obviously adherents to the Catholic Church who do good. It's just a shame that many of those people, you know, feel that they need to follow one person who is supposed to be infallible. And I mean, I don't believe in the infallibility of the Pope or infallibility of anybody. I used to think I was infallible. I found out that I was wrong, and so I don't think anybody's infallible. If I'm not infallible, you're not infallible. But being seriously, you know, the Pope is not going to be infallible, but he might be very wise, he might be very, you know, I'm sure they're being really intelligent and clever popes and things, but infallible, no. And the problem is that if you start putting your faith in one person or one group of people, people make mistakes. You know, governments make mistakes, and that's really the church, the Catholic Church, and any big institution, and even small institutions, are political institutions. And the church is, I mean, the Catholic Church is a political institution. The Vatican, this is a formal visit to Britain by the Pope, representing the Vatican City, which is just a little statelet. And the thing about it, though, is although it's very small in terms of geographical area, the amount of power and influence that the Vatican and the Pope and the Catholic Church exert is quite significant because of the number of adherents that they have, over 1 billion followers around the world in different parts of the world. And so that is where the problem can arise, because people blindly, and it is often very blindly, you know, in hysteria, and we will see quite a bit of this during this visit over the next 4 days after the Pope arrives in Glasgow. People will be going wild and saying how wonderful he is, when in fact, you know, he's got some things to answer for not actually dealing, when he was Cardinal Ratzinger, with some of these very horrible issues which I'm sure would have been difficult to deal with, but not really difficult if you were just thinking of the people, the children, the now adults who were abused as children involved. Any person with true compassion for these people would have seen what needed to be done to the people who were perhaps sick, perhaps weak, perhaps wicked. The priests who abused these people need to be dealt with in a firm and proper way. But that's not what's happening. The Church, the Catholic Church, like any political institution, like a political party, is trying to protect itself, trying to keep the cameras away, keep the prying eyes of the press away, and keep the truth from being known. And that's exactly the opposite that you would think to a religious, spiritual organisation should be doing, what they should be doing. I heard it once said, months, probably a few years ago, the Pope doesn't think in terms of, he was talking about the abuse scandal, the Pope doesn't think in terms of, what's happening in the news today or whatever. The Pope thinks in centuries. Well, that's the problem. There are people who are being affected now, and they need immediate intervention by the authorities. Now, I know, because it was that the Church has responded, the Catholic Church that is, and the Catholic Church, it focuses on the Catholic Church now because it's been much in the news, and the Pope is visiting and so on. But there are other churches, the Jehovah's Witnesses have their own scandal and a similar cover-up in relationship to child sex abuse. But what I'm saying is that they're not the only organisation or church that has this evil problem in their midst. But their response to it, if they are, and I disagree with it, but if they see themselves as the kingdom of God on earth, who wants to be a part of that kind of kingdom? And as I've said before, I don't believe in that principle that they were, or that idea that they were, that the Catholic Church represents the kingdom of God on earth. I don't believe in that for 1 minute. And I think people who do look and believe and follow that are letting themselves in for a great disappointment. And it's just a shame that many very, very intelligent people, and I do believe in God, it's not that I'm trying to undermine people's faith, but I feel that our faith should be in God. You can put your faith where you want, but a lot of people put their faith in men and women and so on. And there are all kinds of things that I might go into that I disagree with, particularly with the Catholic Church, but with many different organisations. But the main point here is that the Catholic Church has a lot of power. It wields a lot of power, and therefore it has a lot of responsibility, whether we agree that it should do or not, and it has a lot of influence, and the way in which that has been used, the way that the Pope has responded to these various crises in respect to child abuse and so on, is deeply, deeply disappointing and discouraging. It would, I would have thought, lead people away from belief in God, certainly away from belief in the Catholic Church. But there will be hundreds, probably tens of thousands of people out there in adulation of essentially a man in white robes